I know. Well, I mean, how many times have you been sung onto the stage?
I've been, sung off the stage.
Well, welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for being here, Governor. We're so excited to have you and to talk about climate and resilience and technology. And one of the things that's been so remarkable, you're in, I checked, day 288.
Is it 288?
Of your first term as governor after...
Already have a recall against me.
Is that right?
Seems appropriate.
Okay,
It's been
well,
9 months.
it must be doing something right. And that's after 8 years as lieutenant governor, for those of you who are not from the state, and many years as...
I know no one forgot my lieutenant governor years.
Yeah. But in your tenure as governor, 9-ish months, one of the things that when it comes to climate change, it's been remarkable is how you've intentionally integrated climate thinking into all the other state issues: transportation, housing, economic and workforce development, I think public health, maybe schools, I'm not sure about that, and transportation, of course. Talk a little bit about what's behind that.
Well, I think, look, I think most of us are very proud to live in a state that gets it and is increasingly getting it done as it relates to the issues of low carbon green growth. I came in, I hope most of us agree with that. And there's no question we have an enormous amount of work to do, but one area where we've truly excelled is on goal setting. When your goal is to get to 100% by 2045 in the RPS and carbon-free economy, you're pushing the envelope. Obviously, folks feel like we need to do even more than that. Rolling back our greenhouse gas emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030, getting those 5 million vehicles, electric vehicles, out on the streets by 2030, 1.5 million by 2025. All of these goals, and I can honestly go on and on and on, but goals are just dreams with deadlines. We've got to translate those goals to investments and action, and I think that's the spirit of this conference. And in order to do that, you've got to integrate your strategies. I see housing as a climate issue. I see transportation as a climate issue. We've got to integrate our strategies in a much more comprehensive way. And so my job, uniquely taking the baton from the leadership, demonstrable leadership of the former pro tem in our state and speaker and substantively Governor Jerry Brown, is in the application, the implementation. My job is to get in the how business, and that is the beginning, mapping out strategies of implementation, localizing solutions, and incorporating our values in a much more robust, comprehensive way.
So I think it's pretty easy to see where transportation fits in with climate. What about housing? How do you see those two tied together? California, of course, has a significant housing shortage. There's sprawl, but at the same time, where is the linkage?
I mean, density. Focus on infill, focusing on density bonuses in and around transit corridors, reducing vehicle miles traveled, focusing on advancing our audacious 3.5 million housing, that's our housing goal, but doing it in a thoughtful and judicious way that doesn't negate and dismiss those linkages, which so often has been the case from a land use perspective in the past. And with respect, I think more I focus on the issue of climate change and climate resiliency, the more I spend time in conferences large and small, including, by the way, the UN just a few weeks ago. I'm always surprised how little we talk about land use and how that should be more of a point of focus and emphasis as it relates to our efforts, particularly in a state as dense as California.
I saw you speak in the opening ceremony at Climate Week New York 3 weeks ago. And first of all, it was kind of amazing. There's the president of Costa Rica, nice applause. The prime minister of Denmark, nice applause. The governor of California, woo! Standing ovation. But you've become a bit of a rock star in this, and I'd say globally as well. And that's not the question. But one of the things you said...
I thought it was a fabulous question if it was. Yeah.
One of the things you said there was that California is running on historic budget surpluses, not despite our environmental strategies, but because of them. Explain that.
Well, it's an interesting fact. I mean, California is just an interesting fact. We just enjoyed our 114th consecutive month of net job creation. That's the longest in California's history. Just a few days ago, our unemployment rate was the lowest in modern recorded history. Our GDP is substantially outperforming the rest of the nation and some of our key other state competitors. We're enjoying the biggest surplus in California's history, and we are moving forward with a fully functioning cap and trade program, and we are detoxifying and decarbonizing our economy. And I made the point that's self-evident to every one of you in this room, that we're doing this not despite, as you suggest, of our environmental goals, but because of them. 5 times now more clean energy jobs in the state of California than fossil fuel jobs. We're proving the paradigm of and the genius that is and versus the tyranny that is or, that somehow it's a trade-off. You have to do one or the other, and we're doing it at a scale that no one else is doing it in the United States, and I would argue anywhere else in the world.
Well, and part of that is that you'd recently signed an executive order, I think just last month, to, I guess, create guidelines for to the Department of Finance to guide the $700 billion of investment capital for that CalPERS and CalSTRS, the state employee pension fund and the teachers pension fund. Do you expect, what are you looking to do there? How do you see that making a difference?
We move markets. I mean, we know policy is an accelerator, but we move markets as it relates to our investment. We have an investment portfolio, PERS and STIRS, that's north of $700 billion. We, in the sort of lexicon, the nomenclature, the old saw that is Wayne Gretzky in sports, you want to skate to where the puck will be. We know where the economy is going. We know where our opportunities lie. Why are we not investing in those opportunities today? And so I want, with intentionality, with focus, with an aggressive posture and stance, PERS and STIRS, not to debate situationally the opportunities, but to focus on moving markets and moving their investment portfolio in this space. And for California to do that would be an extraordinary thing and will truly make an impact that will be measurable. And particularly those business leaders in this room, I think it's exactly what you should expect of your state. We have audacious goals. And if our goals are intended to be achieved, then we've got to back those goals up with real action and real investment. And why not have PERS and STIRS leading the way? And that was the purpose.
So how do we make sure that action and investment is inclusive? The growth, the green growth that we have in this state brings everybody to the table in the Central Valley and West Oakland and everywhere that's needed.
Well, where California has failed, and I say lovingly and respectfully, is on inclusion. We've had a growth agenda for my lifetime, but we've fallen short on inclusion. And I don't need to give you any more evidence. Walk the streets of Oakland or San Jose, San Francisco, LA, or Bakersfield, or Modesto for that matter. You see the ultimate manifestation of our failure on that issue of inclusion with the homeless crisis in the state, the fact that we're richest and poorest state. So you can't have an economic and growth agenda without having an agenda around inclusion. I think of California capitalism as separate and above, at least it should be, in terms of that frame and that focus. And so it's about, yes, environmental justice and economic justice. It's addressing those that have been left behind in this economy and those that may be left behind as we transition into the new economy, particularly urban poor, the elderly, particularly those in rural California. And this is also a point of emphasis. We have an obligation, and I say this as a coastal Democrat, as someone who's grown up in the Bay Area, a fifth generation Bay Area resident, we have an obligation to make sure that we are truly representing the state of California. Many parts, but one body, 58 counties, 470 plus cities. And the folks in the inland part of the state need to be a big part of the solution as it relates to advancing our low carbon green growth goals.
One of the other roles that you and the state, but particularly you, have played is really a bulwark against the national administration, the White House.
I love you don't even use the word.
No, we often don't. I guess what's the end game there? Is it about just holding back the rollbacks and the regression, or do you actually see the potential at the national scale, or maybe even global, for California to be influential in furthering progress?
It's defense and offense. But the best defense is an aggressive posture and aggressive alternative to the status quo. Look, success leaves clues, the power of emulation. California is proving what you have all been asserting for a generation. And as I said, we're doing it at a scale no one else is doing. That's the offensive strategy. We have a proof point in that. It is also a point of friction at the moment where we're playing defense and offense, and that's on tailpipe emissions, vehicle emissions, where Trump is being challenged by California's unique status as a leader going back to 1967, a leader that has established itself through Republican, not just Democratic administrations, through our federal waiver and through establishing a framework to lead the nation on our tailpipe emissions standards. As a consequence, we have 4 large automobile manufacturers that have decided to agree voluntarily to the higher emission standards out of the state of California than to support the rollback of those standards, which now are referred to as the Obama-era standards. And that has put Trump in this unbelievably powerless position, which has frustrated him to no end. Only California can do that to him. So I am very proud to live in the most un-Trump state in America. And the goal is to defeat him, to defeat his posture, his denialism, his ignorance, his stupidity, his arrogance, to defeat him. In every one of those opportunities, we will defeat him because there's too much at stake. I don't want to be righteous about this, but we cannot allow him to succeed. And this state punches above its weight. We're not a small, isolated state. There's no navel-gazing in California. We move markets, and the private sector gets it, and that's why these companies decided to join us. And that's why I'm so proud of this state and so proud of all of you to have our backs as we fight these good fights, 60-plus lawsuits with the Trump administration. And with all due respect, as Becerra said, our AG, with his current batting average in terms of successes versus losses, he'd be in the damn Hall of Fame. And that's California. And so let's keep going, and let's not for a second roll over to the tyranny of what's happening in Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Well, I asked about the end game. That was a pretty good answer. We're running quickly out of time here, but what have you learned about making change happen? And particularly in that, what's your ask of the business community and the beyond business, both large and small companies, utilities, cities, and others in this room? But let's focus on the private sector. What's your ask that you need to further faster the kinds of changes you want to make?
Be audacious, hold us to account. It's the dialectic. I think a lot about leadership broadly defined, and I've concluded, leadership can be found anywhere. You don't have to be something to do something. And I often think those in positions of formal authority are burdened with constraints. I remember Havel, the former president of Czechoslovakia, talked about how governing degeniused him, that he had more power on the outside than he did with that position of president, because he had moral authority. And so the answer to the question is hold us to a higher level of expectations. Be audacious in your expectations. Good enough never should be from your perspective. And I live by a paradigm, and gets me in trouble politically because we tend to have stretch goals, and often that's fodder for our critics. But Michelangelo was right. The biggest risk in life is not that we aim too high and miss it. It's that we aim too low and reach it, particularly on the issue that brings us here today. So hold us to high expectations. Hold us to account. Don't hold back.
So when we meet back here at VERGE 22, towards the end of your first term, the last few months of your first term, what's the story you hope to be able to tell about California, resilience, energy, and climate?
Well, we didn't just survive the headwinds coming out of the White House. We thrived during these years, that we continue to push the paradigm, that we continue to influence others all across the country. We now have 24 governors that have joined this alliance on climate. More and more are coming on board, a bipartisan alliance of people that get it and want to get it done in this space. And we all recognize, and my hope and expectation is looking back perhaps a few years from now, we will have also proven this at a broader scale, that if you don't like the way the world looks when you're standing up, stand on your head and go local. Remarkable things are happening in cities, in counties, in municipalities, large and small, all across the country, in states where people aren't interested in the debate. It's not about scientific debate any longer for folks, it's about observed evidence. They understand that the hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier, the wets are getting wetter, and that we have an obligation to address this new reality. And in turn, look at this as an incredible opportunity, not a burden, not something to bring us down. I think the previous speaker was just making that point as one of the great opportunities that's been presented in our lifetime, and we embrace it boldly and optimistically. And I hope that's the frame of reference that we can look back on in the next few years.
Well, Governor, I can't thank you enough for, first of all, helping us kick off this conference, but more so for showing what true leadership is on climate and reminding us what that can and does in fact look like, and showing that the path around climate change is perilous, but it need not be paralyzing.
There you go.
And that we can do this with our economy intact and then some. And that's a very, very refreshing thing to hear from anyone, particularly the chief executive of the world's fifth largest economy. So
Of our state.
Please join me in thanking the Honorable Gavin
Thank you guys
Newsom.
for everything you do. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.